Skip it up and that up. So no, IGN, I don't think that the PS5 and Xbox Series X will be only $400, and I also don't think they will be failures if they launch at $500. I like Damon Hatfield, I have respect for IGN, but this was a bad take. Let's get into it. Do you have one of these? Do you have a Switch Lite or do you have a regular Switch? Then you should get a Satisfy gaming grip. They're a sponsor of this channel and I absolutely love their products. They make the Switch Lite and Switch really ergonomic. I use the grip on my Switch Lite especially all the time, and they also have awesome cases that you could store all of your accessories in, down to the power supply and everything else, all of your games. And there's also a link below in the description. If you use the code ReviewTech10, you'll get 10% off your entire order. I can't recommend these grips enough, and thank you to Satisfy for sponsoring these videos. So there's a podcast that IGN has that's called Game Scoop, and I actually kind of like it. I just subscribe to it now, where Damon Hatfield's on there. He's an IGN veteran, and today was episode 567, where it says $400 is the magic number for a console launch. And then they go on to say that anything beyond that price is usually the console is a failure, at least at launch. And I kind of don't agree with what they say. And I don't feel that the PS5 and Xbox Series X will be failures if they launch at $500. Anyway, here's the clip from GameScoop. Take a look at it, then we'll discuss.
I want to talk about how much the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X might cost, because we're hearing lots of reports that scarce parts are driving up the manufacturing costs above $400, could be $450, could be even more than that. And the reason why I think that could be a big deal is because, quite frankly, my dear, there has never been a successful console launch that cost over $400. Just never has been.
Yeah, so you dug into some data about that?
Well, all you have to do is look at how much consoles cost when they launched. Only the PS3 and the Xbox One X, in terms of popular mainstream consoles, cost more than $400 at launch. Both of them were failures at launch.
Okay. That's really interesting. I've never thought about that before.
So the 3DO launched at about $800.
Yeah, and what happened to that?
It failed at launch.
Trip Hawkins is, I don't even know.
He's rolling over in his grave.
Now, the Virtual Boy launched for $250 at launch.
Which one? Yeah.
The Virtual Boy.
Yeah. Which is, it just goes to show, even if you do come in under $400, you're not guaranteed success.
All right. So the Damon rules apply still. Huh.
Thank you.
Well, so the PS3, you're saying, was just compared to the Xbox 360 at launch, it never caught up.
Well, I think it eventually,
the expensive system in our time.
The PS3 ended up okay, but it was very dicey for a long time.
Yeah. And it was $600 ish at launch.
$599 US.
There were two SKUs, $500 and $600.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that was crazy at the time.
Well, it also colored the entire conversation around the consoles, and so that became the biggest thing people were talking about, thinking about oh, this isn't really affordable.
Yeah. And then the Xbox One was $500 because they tried to shoehorn the Kinect into it. Nobody wanted that. So I just don't. What if the PlayStation 5 is actually $450 or more? What does that mean? Are gamers okay with that now?
And that's just for that $450 is the report is that's just the cost of the parts to Sony, and clearly the actual process of manufacturing it, putting it in a box, marketing it, shipping it, Sony's cost alone is going to be well over $500. Yeah. If the $450 cost for parts is accurate.
Yeah, and for comparison, the PS4 cost them, I believe, $381 to manufacture each one.
Oof.
So they were
start.
Yeah, so they were either making a tiny profit or breaking even when they sold those consoles. So
first off, IGN, there's no way with the specs that are going to be inside of the next gen consoles that they're just going to be $400, unless Microsoft and Sony go back to the loss leader mindset, which if Microsoft's making a lower end next gen console, I definitely don't think they're going to do that. They're going to look to at least recoup the cost of the parts from launch, both Sony and Microsoft. It's just not going to happen. I mean, even if you look at these specs here that I have from Forbes, from that leak, yes, this leak may be bogus, but it's still on par with what we've heard from both Sony and Microsoft. We know they're going to have Zen 2 processors in there, like the Ryzen 7 3700. Granted, this is a retail price. This isn't a bulk stock price that both Sony and Microsoft are going to get from AMD for just buying a whole bunch of parts from them. But the 3700X retail cost, I know it's going to be cheaper for Sony and Microsoft. I just want to make that abundantly clear, because I always see people in the comment section, Rich, retail prices and what corporations pay are totally different. I know, but the processor from across the board, Newegg, Best Buy, and it's pretty much a guarantee that the processor inside of the next-gen consoles is going to be similar to the Ryzen 3700X, goes for the retail cost of $310. We know the GPUs that are from AMD, from the Navi architecture inside of the next-gen consoles, are going to be absolutely monstrous. They may not have the compute performance that was from that Forbes leak that they got from 4chan, where they're talking almost like 12 teraflops of compute performance, but let's say even like, let's go to something that's actually a step down from that, the RTX 2070 Super, which is not as powerful as what they're saying is going to be in the next gen consoles, or maybe it's going to be on par with it, who knows, but whatever. That card, retail again, yes, again, AMD is going to give Sony and Microsoft cheaper pricing because they're buying them in bulk. It goes for $500. And the next-gen consoles are going to be supposedly more powerful in terms of compute performance. The graphics processors are going to be more powerful in terms of compute performance inside of the next-gen systems than a 2070 Super. There's no possible way. They're getting a higher-end cooling system. I did a video on it inside of the PlayStation 5, which costs next to nothing, but it's still more of a cost than what Sony would usually spend on a cooler. Combining all of this together, the super fast solid-state drive tech that's going to be inside both the PS5 and Xbox Series X, it is impossible that they're going to take such a loss that they're going to sell ninth-gen consoles, both Sony and Microsoft, at $400. It's just not going to happen. And secondly, yes, even though Microsoft screwed up with how they launched the Xbox One and they tried to shoehorn in the Kinect, so on and so forth, the Xbox One X, I mean, granted, its sales have stalled significantly now for an obvious reason. We're on the cusp of next gen. We're on the eve of next gen, I should say. Why the hell would you go out and buy an Xbox One X right now? But there was a time the Xbox One X was selling pretty well. This actually comes from November 2018. And MPD was saying this. This is actually Matt Piscatella, who's an analyst over at MPD, said Xbox One sales show the highest growth of the three major platforms in the US this year. And the Xbox One X in particular has been performing phenomenally. Year-over-year growth like this at this point in the cycle has never been seen before. Driven by launch of the Xbox One X and new content delivery efforts, it's a mid-generation turnaround the market's never seen before. This qualifies as phenomenal, even if not market leading. So the Xbox One X was selling well for a time, and it's still a beast of a console, even on the eve of the ninth generation systems. My point being is that Damon Hatfield said that any console that launches beyond $400 has been a flop, or started out as a flop anyway. He pointed out the 3DO, which really, the 3DO's problem wasn't just its cost, which was insane back in the day, like $700, $800 back in the early 90s. Inflate that now, and it's like you got to take out a home equity loan to buy a 3DO. But it also didn't have a phenomenal. There were exceptions like the Street Fighter port that it had, but there wasn't that many great games for it. And you could even say the same for the PS3 when it first launched. He brought up the PS3 too. They had the two different models. One was 500, one was 600, but minus Resistance Fall of Man, which really wasn't, even for its time, a great looking game. It's a good game to play, but wasn't a great looking game. There wasn't anything that the PS3 had to offer. Then you could go on to the Xbox One, the original Xbox One, which came out in 2013, and not only was it more expensive, which I think if the games looked just as good on the Xbox One as they did on the PS4, it would be justified, but they made you pay more for the Kinect, which no one wanted, and because they cut back on hardware performance to shoehorn in the Kinect with the Xbox One, games actually looked worse. So you were buying a more expensive console for Microsoft for crappier looking ports. I don't think it would have been the same story even if the Xbox One was more expensive, if games look better on the Xbox One than the PS4, but it was actually the other way around. You were spending less money in the PS4 and got better looking ports, and you didn't get an accessory shoved down your throat if you got the PS4 back when it launched in 2013, like Microsoft was doing. They were shoving the Kinect down your throat. So my point being is you can't just go by history, because it's also skewed by inflation. I actually looked this stuff up too. Now, I understand this isn't exactly how things work, and it's not inflation doesn't really correlate sometimes to how money felt back in the day. But the SNES, which launched back in 1991, in $2020, okay, around $2020, it would be $380. It gets better though. PlayStation 4 2013 was $400. It would be close to $450 now. If the PlayStation, yeah, it would be close to $450. If you adjust for inflation, you're looking at $450. Now here, take a seat for this one. I'm already sitting because I'm sexy. But anyway, take a seat for this one. The NES, the Rob the Robot set from 1985, okay, was $250. That now in 2020 would be an eye-watering $601. So I understand it's not a black and white comparison. Say, Rich, you don't know exactly how the money felt back then. It's not completely how it works. It's more complicated than that to a degree, yes. But at the same time, it still was what that's how much money, how much worth it had back then. Inflation means that money, the value of money is diminishing. So back at $250 back then was worth $601 now, roundabout, give or take a couple quarters here and there. But that's how much $1985, $250 was worth in 2020. You get what I'm saying? So I just don't see, and plus two, with the launch of the Xbox One X, and on top of it, what we're getting with the hardware, and how, like, to try to put together a system that's going to be, at least from what we know, that a PC gaming system, PC gaming console, listen to me, to put together a gaming PC, if I could talk today, that will be the equivalent of what we're getting with these next gen systems. You're looking at easily well over $1,000, probably like $1,200 realistically, and that's if you cut a couple corners. So to think that these consoles are going to be $400 unless they do make these cut down versions like the Lockhart that we're hearing from Microsoft, and maybe Sony's going to make their own cut down version. They ain't launching that just $400, man. The days of loss leading from all three corporations are long gone. They don't want to take a loss on the hardware, and we already found out, like they said in that clip, that to produce the PS5 is costing around $450. I'm telling you, $500 is going to be the magical number for these next-gen systems, maybe even a little more. And hey, if it's $400 and I'm wrong, I'll be happy about that. I'll be more than glad to go to the Best Buy counter or wherever I get my next-gen systems, or if GameStop's still around at that point, especially if the consoles get delayed. I'll be more than happy to go with $100 less up to the counter and just spend $400 on the PS5 and Xbox Series X. But the reality of it is, with the specs that we have and how much is going into these consoles, it's just not feasible. And I still think even at $500, because people are more accustomed now with consoles like the Xbox One X to spend that much money for a console, spend $500 for a console, I think people will be okay with it. This is Rich of Review Tech USA signing out. Have a good one. Hey, if you enjoy my content, consider becoming a Review Tech USA member. I'll have a link below in the description. I live stream now on this channel all the time, and it gives you access to cool emoticons to use as well while I live stream. Again, link below in the description. Thank you for your continued support.